Hey, Daily Dosers. I never had an opportunity to go back to my high school reunion, but I've seen movies about going back to your high school reunion and I've heard stories of it. And as I think back on it, when the time came to go and I looked at the possibility of going, I'd considered who I would meet and what it would look like to go back and kind of rewind the clock on all of those relationships, those people that I'd seen. But through social media, there's been an opportunity for me to get a sneak peek of what it would have been like to have gone to my high school reunion 20 years later type of a thing. And there's certain people that I've seen or become in contact with through social media to go, oh, that's what they've become. And the surprise and the shock to see a transformed life. And that reminds me of this story here. Did you see the transforming work of what interaction with Jesus can do in someone's life? And in the book of John, in chapter 9, there's an interaction Jesus has with a man, and he performs a miracle, and we want to take a look at that today. It says this in chapter 9. It says, as he, that's Jesus, passed by, he saw a man from birth, blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? You see, in that day, in that culture, there was an assumption that that punishment or something like being born blind was a punishment for a sin. And so therefore the question arose, was it this guy's fault he's blind from his own sin? Or would it be a generational sin from his parents? And Jesus answered him and he says this, it is not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and he made mud with the saliva. And then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud. And he said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. And so we see this interaction where Jesus sees a man, his disciples are having this conversation on sin and the ramifications of sin and judgment. And Jesus points out this biblical concept that sometimes situations happen in our lives that are a result of God's glory needing to be revealed. And sometimes those tragic or events like being born blind are neither a result of the parent's sin or their sin, but simply so that God's miracle can be shown and God's power can be revealed through it. And in this story, it's super interesting because in that time, it happened to be the Sabbath when Jesus performed this miracle. And so the leaders, the Pharisees of that day, were trying to cast out doubt on Jesus being the Messiah and people proclaiming him as the Messiah or a prophet. And so they brought this man born blind into them to question him because they doubted that Jesus had performed this miracle and because the story was that it was done on the Sabbath. And so how could Jesus, if he's from God, possibly do work on the Sabbath, even if it's restoring someone's sight? And the irony of that, you can't heal someone with the power of God on the Sabbath. You must not be from God if that's the case. And so they're questioning this. And it says here, it says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and I see. And that was it. And I find it funny, they didn't believe him. And so they bring his parents in. They're like, well, this can't be the guy. This someone's like masking going, I was born blind and Jesus healed me. And they're like, that's not true. So they bring his parents in. Is this really your son? They're like, yep, that's our son. And it's like, okay, well, we can't refute that. I mean, his own parents say that it's him. So it must be him. So yes, a miracle has been performed. So they ask his parents and they're like, who did this? Was this really Jesus? And they not wanting to be caught up in all of this because they knew the Jews were already, against Jesus and some proclamations they had made. They said, he's of age, ask him. We don't want anything to do with this. And so he says this, so for a second time, they called the man who had been born blind, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. And he answered, whether this man is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know that I was blind, now I see. And this guy gives glory to Jesus and says, basically, all I know is my life transformed. I don't know who this man is. I didn't even see him. Remember, I was blind. He put mud on my eyes and then he was gone. This man hadn't even encountered a face-to-face with Jesus yet. He didn't know who had actually healed him. And so he was doing that. Well, later it says this. It says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And he answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is the one who is speaking to you. And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. You see, when we get that face-to-face encounter with Jesus and the miracle in our life, for us as Christians, it's the forgiveness of sin. We don't need our eyesight restored. We don't need our crippled legs healed. We know that Jesus is who he is, and the simple miracle in our life is the restoration of a relationship with God through the forgiveness of our sin through Jesus Christ. And that's greater than any physical remedy that anyone could perform. And like Jesus said, sometimes our life is meant to be that, a glory to God simply because God works in us. And that's the story that all of us have. Whether it's a miraculous story or not, whether we've gone to the brink of this extremity and then seen the restoration or not, all of us were headed to hell and death and have now been given life eternal. And that story is enough to tell others, whether you believe in Jesus or not, all I know is I was blind and now I see. All I know is I was dead and now I'm alive. And all of us have that testimony to share. Have a good day, Daily Dosers.